The massive crystal halls of Zentara Prime gleamed under the light of twin suns as delegates from across the galaxy gathered for another Galactic Council meeting. Ambassador Lisa Carter walked through the corridors, her simple human attire looking plain next to the elaborate robes and armor of other species. She could feel their eyes on her, some curious, others dismissive. Most barely acknowledged her existence. Lisa took her seat in the far corner of the great chamber where the minor species sat. The humans had been given this spot 3 years ago when they first made contact with the galactic community. It was meant to show their place in the cosmic order. Small, unimportant, safe to ignore. The towering reptilian form of General Kethvar dominated the center platform as he addressed the council. His scales glinted like black metal under the lights, and his yellow eyes swept across the assembled delegates with predatory focus. The outer rim territories grow more unstable each cycle, he declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. Pirates attack merchant vessels. Rogue colonies refuse to pay their taxes. The Vorthak Empire offers our services to restore order to these lawless regions. Several delegates nodded in agreement. The Vorthak military was known throughout the galaxy for their efficiency in dealing with troublemakers. What most didn't mention was how few survivors remained after their interventions. Lisa watched as General Kethvar's gaze fell on the human section of space displayed on the holographic star map. She saw the hunger in his eyes, the way his forked tongue flicked across his lips. The human colonies were right in the middle of what he called the unstable outer rim. Some species in these regions lack the strength to maintain proper civilization, Kethvar continued. Perhaps it would be better if stronger hands guided their development. The ethereal form of Nexari High strategist Zelthara floated beside the platform, her translucent body shifting between different shades of blue. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. The Nexari Collective agrees with our Vorthak allies, she said. We have observed these primitive human settlements. Their minds are simple, unguarded. They would benefit from our guidance. Lisa felt her hands clench into fists under the table, but she kept her expression calm. She had learned long ago that showing anger would only prove their point about human emotions being a weakness. The human delegate wishes to speak? Asked Consul Telmaj, the current council leader. His tone suggested he found the idea amusing. Lisa stood and activated her translation device. The human colonies are peaceful and self-sufficient. We trade fairly with all species and have never threatened anyone. We ask only to be left alone, to grow at our own pace. General Kethavar's laugh was like grinding stone. Left alone? Child, you speak as if you have a choice in the matter. Your entire species commands what? 30 ships? 40? The Vorthak Empire has patrol fleets larger than your entire navy. Other delegates joined in the laughter. Lisa had heard these numbers thrown around before. The galaxy believed humanity possessed a small collection of outdated vessels barely capable of defending their own solar system. She let them believe it. Far from the crystal halls of Zentara Prime, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the stars drift past through the view screen. His ship was humanity's flagship, the most advanced vessel in their public fleet. At least that's what everyone else believed. Admiral, we're receiving another distress signal from the merchant vessel Starlight, reported Commander Amy Brooks from the tactical station. Vorthak raiders again, sir. Jake nodded grimly. The attacks were becoming more frequent, more bold. The raiders would hit a target, then retreat into neutral space before human ships could respond. It was a classic strategy to test enemy response, times and capabilities. Set course to assist, best speed, Jake ordered. And Amy, make sure we look appropriately concerned about our fuel consumption during the jump. His crew understood the game they were playing. Every scan, every interaction with alien species needed to reinforce the image of humanity as struggling newcomers barely keeping their heads above water. Lieutenant Commander Paul Green looked up from his engineering station. Sir, should I continue transmitting those power fluctuation readings? Make it look like our engines are stressed? Keep it believable, Paul. Not so bad they think we're completely helpless, but enough to suggest we're pushing our limits. 8,000 meters below the surface of Earth's Pacific Ocean, a very different conversation was taking place. Admiral Susan Hayes stood in the command center of Project Deep Harbor, studying displays that showed every major military movement in the galaxy. Her gray hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her blue eyes missed nothing as they tracked the data streams flowing across dozens of screens. "Ma'am, Captain Scott is reporting in from the Vorthak border," announced Lieutenant Commander Maria Torres from her station. "The invasion fleet is larger than we initially estimated." Susan walked over to examine the intelligence reports. Captain Ryan Scott commanded the UES Phantom, one of 47 stealth reconnaissance ships that had been gathering information on alien civilizations for the past 60 years. His current mission involved shadowing Vorthak naval exercises near human space. "How much larger?" Susan asked. 3,000 vessels, Admiral. They're calling it a training exercise, but our analysis suggests they're positioning for a coordinated strike." Susan nodded. The Vorthak Empire had been building toward this for months. Their public statements about restoring order to the outer rim were just preparation for what they really wanted: the complete conquest of human space. "And the timeline?" "Captain Scott estimates they'll be ready to move within 2 weeks." Around the command center, dozens of technicians monitored communications from across the galaxy. They tracked merchant shipping, military communications, diplomatic channels, and even entertainment broadcasts. For 60 years, humanity had been listening to everything, learning about every species they might one day encounter. The aliens thought humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, but the truth was far different. Earth's first contact with alien technology had happened in secret when a damaged exploration vessel crash-landed in the Amazon rainforest in 1962. Instead of announcing their discovery to the world, a small group of military leaders and scientists had made a different choice. They decided to learn everything they could before revealing humanity's existence. The crashed ship's computers contained star charts, language databases, and detailed information about dozens of alien civilizations. Human scientists spent decades decoding the information, building their own versions of alien technology, and preparing for the day when contact would be inevitable. When humanity finally revealed itself to the galaxy 3 years ago, they were ready. They knew which species could be trusted, which ones were threats, and exactly how to present themselves to survive in this dangerous new environment. Susan turned to her communications officer. "Send word to all division commanders. Begin phase 1 preparations." "Yes, ma'am. Should I notify Admiral Morrison?" "Not yet. Jake needs to maintain his role for a few more days. The Vorthak can't suspect we know what's coming." As the command center buzzed with quiet activity, Susan reflected on the enormous deception humanity had maintained. The galaxy saw them as weak newcomers struggling with basic space travel. In reality, human technology had surpassed most alien civilizations years ago. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, and their understanding of galactic politics deeper than anyone imagined. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn the truth about humanity. Susan just hoped it wouldn't be too late for some of the alien species to choose the right side when that moment came. The game of pretending to be weak was almost over. Emperor Grathalok stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Bone Crusher, and gazed out at the largest fleet the Vorthak Empire had ever assembled. 3,000 warships floated in perfect formation around the massive dreadnought, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. Each ship bore the red claw symbol of the Empire, freshly painted for the coming conquest. The Emperor's scarred face showed satisfaction as he reviewed the battle plans. His military advisors had spent months preparing for this moment. The human colonies would fall within days, maybe hours. Then the Empire could expand deeper into the galaxy, using human space as a launching point for bigger conquests. "My lord," General Kethvar approached with a data tablet in his clawed hands. "The final intelligence reports from our border scouts." Grathalok examined the information with growing amusement. The humans had exactly 31 operational warships, most of them converted merchant vessels with basic weapon systems. Their flagship, the Liberty, was barely the size of a Vorthak patrol boat, This will be easier than conquering a moon full of farmers, the Emperor laughed. Are you certain these numbers are correct? Absolutely, my lord. Our spies have counted every human vessel multiple times. They have no hidden bases, no secret shipyards. What you see is everything they possess. Floating nearby, Nexari High Strategist Zelthara's translucent form pulsed with anticipation. Her species had agreed to join the invasion in exchange for access to human colonies for their psychological experiments. The Nexari found human minds particularly interesting subjects for their research. My forces are ready to disable their command structures, she reported. Human minds are so simple to manipulate. Once we control their leaders, the rest will surrender without fighting. Combined Fleet began its final preparations. Vorthak engineers loaded the ships with extra ammunition and boarding equipment. They expected to capture most of the human vessels intact for use as training targets or conversion to Imperial service. In the Galactic Council chambers on Zentara Prime, Ambassador Lisa Carter made one last desperate attempt to prevent the coming disaster. She had requested an emergency session, hoping some species might object to the naked aggression about to be unleashed. Honored delegates, she began, her voice steady despite the fear she felt inside. The Vorthak Empire has assembled a massive invasion fleet on our borders. 3,000 warships are preparing to attack peaceful human colonies. We ask the Council to intervene and prevent this unprovoked act of war. The response was exactly what she had expected. Most delegates looked bored or annoyed at the interruption. Several were quietly conducting their own business, ignoring her completely. Consul Talmage barely looked up from his own datapad. Ambassador Carter, the Empire has assured us this is merely a training exercise in the Outer Rim. Perhaps your sensors are malfunctioning. General Kethavar rose from his seat with theatrical concern. The human delegate seems confused about standard military operations. The Empire conducts regular exercises to maintain readiness. If human colonies are concerned about pirates or other threats, they should have requested our protection services earlier. Lisa looked around the chamber, searching for any friendly face. Only Consul Velandra of the peaceful Altarian Republic met her eyes, and even she shook her head slightly. The message was clear. No one would help. The Vorthak have every right to patrol their border regions, declared the delegate from the crystalline hegemony. Perhaps if humans had developed proper defenses instead of focusing on trade, they would not need to fear routine military exercises. As the session ended, Lisa gathered her materials with trembling hands. She had known this would be the result, but she had to try. Now all she could do was return to Earth and wait for the end. Aboard the UES Liberty, Admiral Jake Morrison received his final orders from Fleet Command. The message was brief and direct. Begin immediate evacuation of all human colonies in the Outer Rim. Every civilian transport that could fly was being pressed into service. Sir, Commander Amy Brooks reported from her station. We're getting panic signals from New Austin Colony. They're requesting immediate evacuation assistance. Jake studied the tactical display showing Vorthak ships massing just beyond the border. His small fleet of 31 vessels was already spread thin, trying to coordinate the massive evacuation effort. How many transports do we have at New Austin, he asked. 12, sir. But they can only carry about half the colonists in one trip. The Vorthak will be here before we can make a second run. Lieutenant Commander Paul Green looked up from his engineering station. Admiral, I've been working on modifications to boost our shield generators. If we push the reactors to maximum output, we might be able to hold them off long enough for the transports to escape. Jake nodded approvingly, even though he knew Paul's modifications were just for show. The real modifications to their ships had been installed years ago in secret, but they had to maintain the illusion that humanity was scrambling desperately to upgrade outdated equipment. Do what you can, Paul. Every minute we buy could save thousands of lives. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Susan Hayes watched the evacuation efforts on her command screens, while simultaneously monitoring the real preparations taking place in hidden facilities across the solar system. The contrast was striking. Above ground, humanity appeared to be in full retreat. Below the surface, the most powerful military force in galactic history was making final preparations. "Admiral," Captain Helen Parker reported from Luna Base 7, "all construction teams have completed final systems checks. We're ready for Phase 2 on your command." Susan looked at the display showing hidden shipyards throughout the solar system. Each facility had been built deep underground or inside hollow asteroids, invisible to alien sensors. For 60 years, humanity had been building their true fleet in absolute secrecy. "What's our final count, Helen?" 5,237 vessels, ma'am, all equipped with Mark 7 stealth systems and Type 3 gravitational manipulation drives. The aliens have never seen anything like what we're about to show them. Captain Ryan Scott's voice came through the secure communication channel from his position shadowing the Vorthak fleet. "Admiral Hayes, they're beginning their final approach. Estimated arrival at the border in 6 hours. Susan turned to her operations officer, Colonel Steve Adams. "Steve, initiate communication blackout with all public fleet vessels. From this point forward, Admiral Morrison and his crews are on their own until the reveal." "Understood, ma'am. What about Ambassador Carter?" "Leave her in the dark. Her shock needs to be genuine when this begins." Around the command center, technicians began the complex process of bringing humanity's hidden fleet online. Ships that had been powered down and waiting in concealment for decades came to life. Crews that had trained in secret for years took their positions at battle stations they had never expected to use. The Vorthak Empire believed they were about to crush a helpless species of primitives. The Nexari Collective expected to find simple minds ready for domination. The rest of the galaxy assumed they would wake up tomorrow to news that humanity had been erased from existence. They were all about to discover how wrong they had been. Susan walked to the main display screen showing the approaching Vorthak fleet. Soon, very soon, the greatest deception in galactic history would come to an end. Humanity had spent 60 years preparing for this moment, building weapons and ships far beyond anything the galaxy had seen, training crews in tactics that no alien military had imagined. "All stations prepare for combat operations," she announced to the command center. "In 6 hours we show the galaxy what humanity really is." The hidden fleet began to move, rising from their concealed positions like sleeping giants awakening from a long dream. Soon the hunters would become the hunted, and the galaxy would learn to fear the species they had dismissed as harmless newcomers. The age of human weakness was about to end. Emperor Grathlock stood on his command bridge, watching the pathetic human fleet take defensive positions around their colony of New Austin. 31 small ships arranged in what looked like a desperate attempt at a battle line. His tactical officers were already calculating how quickly they could crush this resistance. "My lord," reported his fleet commander, "the humans appear to be transmitting surrender terms. Should we accept?" The Emperor's laugh echoed through the bridge. "Let them waste their time with words. Begin the attack as planned. I want to see how long their flagship lasts against real weapons." The Vorthak fleet began moving forward in perfect formation, 3,000 warships advancing like a dark tide toward the tiny human force. Every sensor in the fleet was focused on the enemy vessels, analyzing their weapons and defenses. The data confirmed what they already knew. This would be a massacre. Admiral Jake Morrison watched the approaching enemy from the bridge of the UES Liberty. His crew maintained their expressions of grim determination, even though they knew what was really about to happen. The evacuation transports were clear of the battle zone, their civilian passengers safely away from what was coming. "Sir," Commander Amy Brooks reported, "enemy fleet will be in firing range in 2 minutes. All ships, prepare for combat," Jake announced over the fleet communication channel. "Remember, we hold them here as long as possible." Lieutenant Commander Paul Green made a show of rerouting power to their weapons and shields. "Admiral, I'm pushing the reactors as hard as they'll go. We might get 10 minutes before they overload." The Vorthak ships opened fire first, sending streams of plasma bolts toward the human fleet. Jake's ships returned fire with their smaller weapons, creating spectacular light shows that did little actual damage to the massive enemy vessels. Then something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to ripple around the human fleet as massive energy signatures began appearing on every sensor in the system. The Vorthak targeting computers started screaming warnings as ships materialized out of nowhere, far larger and more powerful than anything in their databases. Admiral Susan Hayes stood on the command bridge of the UES Invincible, her flagship finally revealed after 60 years of hiding. The massive dreadnought was 3 times the size of the largest Vorthak battleship, its hull gleaming with advanced armor that seemed to bend light around its edges. "All units, this is Admiral Hayes," she broadcast on all frequencies. "Decloak and take positions. Show them what humanity really looks like." Across the solar system, over 5,000 human warships dropped their stealth fields and became visible. They had been hiding in plain sight, using gravitational manipulation technology to bend sensor waves around their hulls. Ships emerged from behind asteroids, rose up from planetary shadows, and materialized from what had seemed like empty space. Captain Danny Clark led the first strike wing in his ship, the UES Thunderbolt. His squadron of advanced fighters moved, so fast the Vorthak sensors could barely track them. When they opened fire, their weapons tore through enemy shields like paper, destroying entire battleships with single shots. Emperor Grathlock stared in horror at his tactical displays as they filled with red warning symbols. Where moments before his fleet had faced 31 primitive vessels, now they were surrounded by a force that outnumbered them almost 2 to 1. And every human ship was larger, faster, and more heavily armed than anything in his fleet. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Our intelligence said they had no hidden bases, no secret shipyards." His tactical officer's voice shook with fear. "My lord, our weapons are having no effect on their shields, but their return fire is cutting through our armor like it doesn't exist." Commander Kate Williams coordinated the electronic warfare assault from her ship, the UES Phantom Strike. Human computer systems designed from studying 60 years of alien technology easily penetrated Vorthak networks. Within minutes, half the enemy fleet found their weapon systems disabled and their navigation computers showing false information. The Nexari psychic warriors attempted their mental attacks, trying to break the minds of human crews with waves of fear and confusion. They had never encountered resistance before, but the human minds they touched were protected by mental conditioning, developed specifically to counter their abilities. Lieutenant Commander Maria Torres led the counter-psychic operations from her specialized vessel. When the Nexari tried to invade human thoughts, they found themselves trapped in prepared mental mazes that turned their own powers against them. Several Nexari warriors simply collapsed from the feedback. "My lord," Selthera's panicked voice reached Emperor Grathlock through the communication system. "We cannot penetrate their minds. They have defenses we have never seen before. How is this possible?" The Emperor had no answer. His mighty fleet was being torn apart by enemies that shouldn't exist. Half his ships were already destroyed or disabled, and the humans seemed to be holding back, playing with their prey. Admiral Hayes opened a direct communication channel to the enemy flagship. Her image appeared on screens throughout the Vorthak fleet, showing a calm human woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. "Emperor Grathlock," she said, her voice carrying easily through the chaos of battle. "I am Admiral Susan Hayes of the Human Defense Fleet. You came here expecting to find a weak species ripe for conquest. Instead, you found us." The Emperor managed to find his voice. "This fleet, where did it come from? Our spies watched your colonies for years. We know everything about your capabilities." Susan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Your spies saw exactly what we wanted them to see. Did you really think we would reveal our true strength before we were ready? Humanity has been preparing for this meeting for 60 years. Captain Ryan Scott's reconnaissance ship, the UES Phantom, dropped its cloak directly in front of the Emperor's flagship. Grathlock recognized it as the same type of vessel that had been shadowing his fleet for months, gathering intelligence while remaining invisible. "We know everything about you," Susan continued. "Every ship design, every tactical doctrine, every weakness in your technology. We have been watching and learning while you dismissed us as primitive newcomers." The Vorthak Emperor looked at his tactical display and realized the terrible truth. The humans had positioned their ships at every escape route. His fleet was completely surrounded, with no possibility of retreat. In less than an hour, the mightiest military force in Vorthak history had been reduced to scattered wreckage. "We surrender," he transmitted, his voice broken. "Please, we surrender." Susan considered his plea for a moment. Around them, the last of the Vorthak ships were powering down their weapons and shields. The mighty invasion force that was supposed to conquer humanity in a single day had been destroyed in less than an hour. "Surrender accepted," she replied. "Your surviving crews will be taken to secure facilities for processing. As for you, Emperor, you will have the honor of explaining to the Galactic Council how the species you called primitive just destroyed the most powerful fleet in your empire's history." News of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. Emergency communication networks carried reports that seemed impossible to believe. The humans, dismissed as weak newcomers barely capable of space travel, had revealed a fleet that made the combined militaries of most species look like children's toys. On Zentara Prime, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session as reports flooded in from the battle zone. Ambassador Lisa Carter sat in her usual corner seat, but now every eye in the chamber was focused on her. The dismissive laughter and casual contempt had been replaced by fear and desperate curiosity. "Ambassador," Consul Talmaj's voice shook slightly. "Perhaps you could explain to the Council how your species acquired such substantial military assets?" Lisa stood slowly, enjoying the moment she had dreamed of for 3 years. "Honored delegates," she began, "I believe the explanation you're looking for is quite simple. You underestimated us. The galaxy had spent 3 years believing humanity was weak, but the truth was finally revealed. Earth had been playing the longest game in galactic history, and they had just shown everyone what the final move looked like. The age of human deception was over. The age of human dominance had begun. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 6 hours, and the chamber buzzed with panicked conversations in dozens of languages. News reports from the battle zone continued to arrive, each one more shocking than the last. The complete destruction of the Vorthak invasion fleet was just the beginning. Ambassador Lisa Carter stood at the center of the chamber, no longer relegated to the corner reserved for minor species. Every delegate's attention was focused on her, as she activated a holographic display showing the true extent of human space operations. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet chamber. "For the past 60 years, humanity has maintained observation posts in every major star system in the galaxy. We have monitored your communications, studied your technologies, and tracked your military movements." The display showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, with thousands of small red dots scattered throughout. Each dot represented a human stealth ship or monitoring station that had been operating in secret for decades. Consul Talmaj leaned forward in his seat, his usually composed demeanor cracked with worry. "Are you saying your species has been spying on us this entire time?" "Not spying," Lisa corrected. "Learning. When we first discovered we were not alone in the universe, we made a choice. We could reveal ourselves immediately and hope for the best, or we could study the galactic community first and prepare for whatever we might find." The crystalline hegemony's delegate, General Morthak, rose from his seat. His species had been considered the galaxy's premier military power for over 2 centuries. "This is impossible. Our sensors would have detected any human presence in our systems." Admiral Susan Hayes materialized as a hologram in the center of the chamber, her image transmitted directly from her flagship. The delegates fell silent as she began to speak. "General Morthak, your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect. Let me demonstrate." The chamber's main view screen activated, showing a live feed from the crystalline home system of Quarith Prime. The image showed their massive orbital defense platforms and patrol fleets surrounding their capital world. "You are looking at your most heavily defended system," Admiral Hayes explained. "Now watch." A single human ship decloaked directly above the planet's north pole. The UES Absolute, commanded by Captain Nick Turner, had been sitting invisible in the heart of the crystalline military for 3 months. General Morthak's crystalline features began to glow with alarm. How did that vessel penetrate our defenses? It didn't penetrate them, Hayes replied calmly. It was already there when your defenses were built. We've been watching your species for 47 years. Captain Turner's ship began a slow orbit around the planet, easily avoiding the desperate attempts by crystalline vessels to intercept it. The human ship moved like it was swimming through water while the alien defenders struggled to match its speed and maneuverability. Your orbital platforms are armed with quantum disruption cannons, Admiral Hayes continued. Impressive weapons, but they require 17 seconds to charge between shots. Your patrol ships use predictable formation flying that leaves gaps in coverage every 43 seconds. Should I continue? The crystalline delegate sat down heavily, his glow dimming to almost nothing. Around the chamber, other species began to understand the implications. If humanity had been watching the mighty crystalline hegemony for decades, what did they know about everyone else? The Nexari Collective, Hayes continued, turning her attention to the floating forms of their delegates. Your psychic abilities are powerful, but they rely on specific brainwave patterns that can be disrupted with the right frequency modulation. We developed countermeasures 30 years ago. The Nexari representatives pulsed with various colors of distress. Their mental dominance had been the foundation of their power for millennia. If humans could resist their abilities, their entire civilization was vulnerable. Lisa activated another display, this one showing detailed intelligence reports on every major species in the galaxy. We know about the secret weapons research on Altair 7. We know about the illegal slave trading operations in the Outer Rim. We know which governments are planning invasions and which ones are on the verge of civil war. The chamber erupted in angry voices as species realized their most closely guarded secrets had been compromised. Some delegates demanded explanations. Others threatened retaliation. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Why? Asked Consul Velandra of the peaceful Altarian Republic. If you had all this knowledge, all this power, why did you pretend to be weak? Why didn't you reveal yourselves as the dominant force you clearly are? Admiral Hayes smiled at the question. Because, Consul, we hoped it wouldn't be necessary. We watched the galaxy for 60 years, learning about each species, trying to find evidence that the galactic community could be peaceful and cooperative. Some of you gave us hope. The hologram turned to face the Altarian delegation. Your species has never started a war, never conquered another civilization, never enslaved other beings. You trade fairly, share technology freely, and protect those weaker than yourselves. We had hoped others would follow your example. Instead, Lisa continued, we watched as stronger species conquered weaker ones. We saw empires built on slavery and oppression. We observed a galactic community that respected only power and treated mercy as weakness. Captain Ellen Foster's voice joined the transmission from her humanitarian fleet operating in former Vorthak space. We are currently liberating 17 slave worlds that the Vorthak Empire had hidden from galactic authorities. The populations total over 2 billion beings who have been living in chains for generations. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just revealed their military power. They were actively reshaping the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The Korthani Syndicate, Admiral Hayes continued, reading from another intelligence report. You've been planning to invade the peaceful Melody colonies next month. Those plans are now irrelevant. Our third fleet is already in position to intercept your invasion force. The Korthani delegates' insectoid features twitched with fear. You cannot interfere with legitimate expansion operations. We can and we will, Hayes replied simply. The age of the strong preying on the weak is ending. From now on, aggressive species will find themselves facing humanity. Around the chamber, delegates whispered frantically among themselves. Some were calculating whether they could form alliances strong enough to challenge human power. Others were wondering if their own secret plans had been discovered and stopped. Lisa looked around the chamber, seeing the fear in alien eyes that had looked at her with contempt just days before. We are not conquerors. We don't want to rule the galaxy or impose our will on other species. but we will not allow the cycle of aggression and oppression to continue. What do you want from us? Asked Consul Talmage, his voice barely above a whisper. Peace, Admiral Hayes answered. Real peace, not just the absence of war. We want a galactic community based on cooperation instead of domination, species helping each other instead of destroying each other. The Altarian consul Velandra rose from her seat. The Altarian Republic formally requests a mutual defense treaty with Earth. We believe our peoples share the same values and could work together for the benefit of all. Request approved, Lisa replied immediately. We look forward to a long partnership. Other moderate species began voicing similar requests. The Benthic Collective, the Free Traders Union, and the Academic Consortium all sought human protection and alliance. They had spent years living in fear of more aggressive neighbors. Now they saw a chance for something better. But not everyone was ready to accept the new reality. Several military powers were already plotting resistance, believing they could find ways to overcome human advantages through numbers or cunning. They would learn, as the Vorthak had learned, that underestimating humanity was a fatal mistake. Admiral Hayes concluded the transmission with a final warning. To those species considering aggressive action, remember what happened to the Vorthak fleet. 3,000 ships reduced to scrap in less than an hour. We prefer peace, but we are prepared for war. As the council session ended, delegates scattered to contact their home governments with news that would reshape galactic politics forever. The species that had dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers now faced a reality they had never imagined. Humanity had been watching, learning, and preparing for 60 years. Now they were ready to build the galaxy they wanted to see, whether the rest of the species were willing to help or not. The balance of power had shifted permanently. The question now was whether the galaxy would adapt to humanity's vision of peace, or if more demonstrations of human strength would be necessary. 3 months after the revelation of humanity's true power, the galaxy had settled into a new pattern that few could have imagined. The Galactic Council chambers on Zentara Prime now looked very different, with human representatives sitting at the central table rather than relegated to the corners reserved for minor species. Ambassador Lisa Carter reviewed the daily reports that flooded her desk each morning. 47 species had requested formal alliance treaties with Earth. 12 military powers had announced the cancellation of planned expansion campaigns. The slave trade in 3 major sectors had virtually disappeared as human patrol fleets made the practice too dangerous to continue. Ambassador, her aide knocked and entered the office. The Nexari delegation is here for their scheduled meeting. Lisa nodded. The once mighty Nexari collective had been among the first to seek accommodation with humanity after discovering their psychic abilities were useless against human mental defenses. Today they were hoping to negotiate technology-sharing agreements. The 3 Nexari representatives floated into the room, their translucent forms showing the blue patterns that indicated nervousness. High strategist Zelthara, who had once spoken of conquering human minds, now approached with obvious humility. Ambassador Carter, she began, her ethereal voice carefully modulated to show respect. The collective wishes to discuss our proposal for joint research facilities. We believe our scientific capabilities could complement human technology. Lisa had read the proposal several times. The Nexari were offering to share their advanced medical knowledge and energy manipulation techniques in exchange for human protection and access to gravitational manipulation technology. Your terms are acceptable, Lisa replied, but with conditions. Any joint research must be subject to human oversight, and all results must be shared with our other allies. We're building a community here, not a collection of bilateral deals. The Nexari agreed immediately. They had little choice, really. Their entire civilization had been built around psychic dominance, and with that advantage neutralized, they needed human protection to survive in the new galactic order. Across the galaxy, Admiral Susan Hayes stood in the command center of her flagship, monitoring the deployment of human forces to their new roles as galactic peacekeepers. Her fleet had grown from a secret force designed for defense into an active military presence that maintained stability across dozens of star systems. Admiral, Captain Helen Parker reported from her station, The humanitarian mission to the former Vorthak slave worlds is complete. All 2.7 billion individuals have been relocated to safe colonies with full support systems. Casualties during the operation? 0 fatalities among the rescued populations, ma'am. The Vorthak guards surrendered without resistance once they realized fighting was hopeless. Susan nodded with satisfaction. The rescue operations had been one of humanity's first major actions after revealing their fleet. The galaxy had watched as human ships arrived at hidden slave facilities that other species had ignored for centuries, liberating entire populations. With surgical precision, Captain Danny Clark's strike wing had handled most of the military operations, using their advanced speed and firepower to overwhelm Vorthak garrison forces before they could harm the prisoners. Captain Ellen Foster's humanitarian vessels had provided immediate medical care and temporary housing for the refugees. "What's the status on permanent settlements?" Susan asked. "The Altarian Republic has offered citizenship to anyone who wants. The Free Traders Union is establishing new colonies specifically for refugee populations. We estimate 90% of the freed slaves will have permanent homes within 6 months." These operations had sent a clear message to the galaxy. Humanity wasn't just powerful enough to destroy anyone who opposed them. They were also willing to use that power to help those who needed protection. Captain Ryan Scott's reconnaissance division continued to monitor potential threats across the galaxy. His stealth ships watched as several aggressive species struggled to adapt to the new reality where conquest was no longer profitable. "Admiral," Scott's voice came through the secure communication channel, "the Korthani Syndicate is attempting to form a coalition against us. They've approached 17 different species about joining a resistance movement. And the response? Mixed, ma'am. 3 species have agreed to participate, but most are refusing. The others are actively reporting Korthani contact attempts to our diplomatic corps." Susan was not surprised. The Korthani Syndicate was one of several military powers that refused to accept humanity's dominance. They believed they could find ways to overcome human technological advantages through superior numbers or alliance building. Any immediate threats? Not really. The species willing to join them don't have the military strength to pose a serious challenge. And we've been monitoring their communications so we know their plans before they make them. That was one of humanity's greatest advantages in the new galactic order. 60 years of intelligence gathering had given them detailed knowledge of every major civilization's capabilities, weaknesses, and decision-making processes. It was almost impossible for other species to surprise them. On the peaceful world of Altair Prime, Consul Velandra met with human technical advisors who were helping upgrade her species' defensive capabilities. The Altarian Republic had been humanity's first ally, and they were receiving the most advanced technology sharing agreements as a reward for their cooperation. "The gravitational shield generators are working perfectly," reported Lieutenant Commander Maria Torres, who had been assigned as the primary human liaison to the Altarian government. "Your orbital platforms now have defensive capabilities equal to anything in the galaxy." Velandra examined the technical readouts with satisfaction. For centuries, her peaceful species had lived in fear of aggressive neighbors who saw them as easy targets. Now, with human technology and protection, they could defend themselves while maintaining their commitment to nonviolence. "What about the joint colony project?" she asked. "Construction is ahead of schedule. The first mixed human-Altarian settlement will be operational within 2 months. We're calling it Hope Station." Hope Station represented something new in galactic history, a colony where different species would live and work together as equals, sharing technology and culture while building something neither could have achieved alone. It was humanity's vision of what galactic civilization could become. In the ruins of the former Vorthak capital, Emperor Grathlock sat in a human detention facility, composing his memoirs about the rise and fall of his empire. The once mighty ruler had been stripped of his titles and military rank, but allowed to live as an example to other would-be conquerors. "I believed we were the apex predators of the galaxy," he wrote. "For 2 centuries, the Vorthak Empire had conquered every species we encountered. We thought strength was the only thing that mattered, that the weak deserved to be enslaved or destroyed." He paused in his writing to look out the window at the former slave quarters that were being converted into educational facilities by human engineering teams. The irony was not lost on him that his former victims were now learning to build better lives while he wrote about his failures. I realize now that we never understood what real strength looked like. The humans spent 60 years learning about us while we ignored them completely. They built a civilization based on cooperation and planning while we relied on brute force and intimidation. The human guards treated him well, providing comfortable quarters and access to the galaxy's historical archives. It was a kindness his own empire had never shown to defeated enemies. He was beginning to understand why so many species were choosing to align with humanity rather than resist them. Back on Earth, construction crews worked around the clock to expand the facilities at Project Deep Harbor. The secret command center that had coordinated humanity's hidden fleet was being converted into the headquarters for galactic peacekeeping operations. Admiral Jake Morrison, finally relieved of his role as commander of the weak public fleet, now led the Third Fleet in anti-piracy operations throughout the former Outer Rim territories. The regions that had been lawless for decades were becoming safe for peaceful commerce as human patrol ships eliminated the predators that had thrived in the chaos. "It's strange," he commented to Commander Amy Brooks as they watched construction robots building new docking facilities. "For years we pretended to be struggling with outdated equipment. Now we're openly using technology that makes the galaxy's most advanced species look primitive." Amy nodded as she reviewed patrol reports from across their operational area. "The transition has been smoother than anyone expected. Most species seem relieved to have someone else handling the galaxy's security problems. And that was the truth of humanity's new position. The galaxy was tired of constant conflict, endless wars, and the cycle of stronger species preying on weaker ones. When humans offered an alternative based on cooperation and mutual protection, most civilizations embraced it eagerly. As the months passed, the new galactic order became more stable. Human technology helped allied species improve their lives, while human military power deterred aggressive actions. The slave trade disappeared,